everyone. My name is Suzanne Jones, and I am the author of a book called There's Nothing to Fix: Becoming Whole Through Radical Self-Acceptance. So I wanted to bring this presentation to you today because in the state of the world right now with this pandemic, it seems like it's more important than ever to understand the root of our stress, our trauma, our anxiety. And the reason I have this slide is because stress is actually a mechanism of your neurobiological survival response. That neurobiological mechanism is expressly designed to keep us alive by allowing us to pump our body through all kinds of hormones and biochemicals that we need in order to take action without necessarily having to think about it. And we actually share this biological mechanism with every single living creature on the planet. And if we didn't have it, no species would survive. It actually helps perpetuate the species. As human beings, we're born with a basic operating system. So the things that we absolutely need to survive, we're born with. Research is showing now that stress reactivity and traumatic stress can actually be inherited through at least 3 generations. When you're developing in your mother's in utero, your nervous system is developing in mirror with your mother. So if your mother has inherited trauma from her mother, or that mother is inherited from the grandmother, if that trauma or that stress reactivity is not healed, then it will just pass down. So out of the gate, where most of us, I think it would be safe to say, are born with some level of stress reactivity. Humans are actually the most vulnerable species in the world for the longest period of time. So human beings are pretty much helpless to take care of ourselves for many years. As human beings, the most critical survival need that we have is connection. Because if we are not connected to our care providers, we won't get all of the other things that are necessary to survive, like food and shelter and hygiene. Connection with the care provider is so critical that we will register as very young children and infants a disconnection from our care provider, and that is actually going to trigger our survival response, and that creates this fight or flight response in our bodies. Now, as human infants, we cannot fight and we cannot flee. So our natural third option there is to freeze, and that's generally what happens. Even a perceived threat to our survival will trigger this response. Typically, when this happens when we're children, we start to build this toxic stress feedback loop. Any situation that has one or more of these qualities, a lack of control, a quality of uncertainty, lack of information, and in general, just zero predictability. And those are the times we're living in right now. Many of us are probably experiencing stress in our body as a result to the fact that our environment really, just the quality of our environment right now is all of these things. But when you think about stress, it's likely that you think about it as an event. I am stressed because of work, or I am stressed because food is getting expensive, or I am stressed because my kids are at home 24/7 and I don't have any time to myself. So we think of stress as like, it's out here, right? And it's causing me stress, right? But much of the time and much of our lives, our stress is activating in response to outside environments that are not life-threatening. So that might be we have too much work, our kids are driving us crazy, all of these things that I mentioned. And in those cases, stress is actually a memory. So the way that our body remembers events, remember, we don't have the cognitive capacities to be We don't even have language, before the age of, I don't know, 3, 2.5, 3 years old. And we don't have memory in the way we think of it until our hippocampus develops, which is about 2.5, 3 years old. But what we do have is we can register our experiences through all of the sensory aspects of our body, and then we create sensory memory, and that lives in our body. So I have a very quick exercise I'd like you to do with me that is a really good way to experience what I'm talking about, and it's not traumatic, so please don't worry, but I'm going to ask you to participate in this with me. And some of you will have the experience that a lot of people have, and some of you won't, and that's okay. But this is a visualization exercise. So I want you to close your eyes and visualize a lemon sitting on a table. Now bring this lemon to your mind. See it. Maybe there's some moisture on the outside of the skin. Smell it. You can smell the bitterness of that rind. Touch it. It's cool. Maybe just came out of the fridge. And it's very kind of plump and bright yellow. And then there's a knife on the table that you can see. Pick that knife up and cut that lemon in half. Let that lemon open up so now you can see the insides, the flesh of the insides. You could smell that fresh citrus smell. You see it glistening with the juice. And now take that knife and cut one of those halves in half, so you have 2 quarters. So really visualize that quarter of a lemon. And as you're looking at that, you pick it up and bring it up to your mouth. And place the lemon, the flesh of the lemon, between your teeth, and now bite down into the flesh of the lemon. You feel the juice filling your mouth, running down your throat. You feel the response of your face, your jaw, to the juice of the lemon. Maybe give it one more bite. And now take the lemon out of your mouth. And you can open up your eyes. So because I don't have you here in front of me, I'm just going to ask you to sit in recognition of what happened there. For many people, that when I have an audience in front of me and I ask, what was that like? Many people say, I could feel I could feel the sourness. My mouth started to water. It was like I was eating a lemon. Because of these sensory cues, your body believed it was eating a lemon, and it responded with all of the responses that it would respond with if you were eating a lemon. But it wasn't happening. Now, this is exactly how stress or trauma-associated body memories work. So when there is a sensory reminder, and we may not even remember the event, but when there is a sensory reminder, that memory will come all the way from the past, come present in our present moment, and all of the feelings and the experience of that original event will feel like it's happening right now, even though it's not. I have another very quick exercise I'd like you to do with me. We usually do this in partners, and do some partner work when I'm in person with an audience, but I'll just have you do this alone wherever you are. So take a moment to think of a work or personal life stressor that you are dealing with currently. Associate this stressor with one or more of those universal triggers of stress. So remember, it's uncertainty, lack of control, lack of information, unpredictability. And if you're able, notice the sensations in your body. So as you do this, maybe even close your eyes and think about some of the sensory aspects of these stressors. So if it's your kids, you can think about the noise they're creating or whatever it is, the fighting, maybe you have fighting siblings at home. If it's work. So let me just give you a minute to Think about some of these things and notice if you have any sensations in your body. So what did you notice? Again, a lot of people say that they notice like a heavy, maybe a tightness in their chest, shortness of breath, racing heart. So these are all indicators of the stress response. So remember, it's not that it's not difficult, but the stress response is telling you your life is actually in danger. It lives in your body, and the distress is caused by the influx of these hormones and biochemicals that we're not meant to have, as I mentioned, for a long duration. It's just meant to be a short burst. By and large, human beings are experiencing this kind of perceived disconnection threat to our survival through these relationships, starting with these primary relationships with our care providers and moving on to peers. Because the need to be accepted, to belong, to be seen, to be heard, to be understood doesn't stop when we get to a certain age. It's still just as strong. We just kind of move where we're looking for that. We move it from parents to parents and peer groups. Without an awareness of how our bodies actually are perceiving a threat to our life, even if it's not real, we're going to bring that somatic distress into our current lives, our work, our relationships, and we're going to think it's about what's out there, but it's not really about what's out there. It's about how we're actually wired neurobiologically. As we're developing as children, we don't have a lot of power. We don't have the power to fight or flee, right? So what we do is adapt. And it's pretty ingenious how we adapt in the face of these adverse experiences, in particular when they're traumatic. Rabbits turn white in the winter. Foxes turn white in the winter because they have to hunt to live. They have to eat. Butterflies often develop marks on their wings that look like eyes because the birds will go for the eyes and not the body of the butterfly. There are lots of insects that adapt to look like leaves. So this is an amazing, ingenious, biological phenomenon that animals adapt to keep themselves safe and to try to perpetuate the species. Well, human beings adapt too. And we start adapting from the time we are very, very young. So in the best case scenarios, we'll adapt as children to maintain our, let's say, lovability. Many times, when we're developing, when we're young, we will connect our academic performance with our worthiness because we get positive reinforcement from our parents. Now, it's not that our parents are abusing us. That's certainly not the intention. But as children, we are always prioritizing being worthy of love and connection. And if we determine that being a good student is what's going to maintain our lovability, that's what we will do. Where this becomes problematic is that when we're in school, maybe primary school, elementary school, high school, and in particular in college, where there's an exploding mental health crisis, students are registering a lapse in academic performance with their actual survival. So if you want to deconstruct this, right, if a child determines that being smart makes them lovable and worthy, and that's what our neurobiology determines is crucial for our survival, when we get to a place where we're actually all grown up and we don't need, we don't need our parents to feed us, house us, clothe us, all that stuff, our body is still remembering that what is crucial to our survival is to perform academically. And if we're having trouble in a class or we don't have time to study or whatever, our body's going to send out those messages that are saying your life's in danger. That's the stress that students can experience. That's how you know it's attached to your worth. And students are taking drastic measures, even committing suicide, because the somatic distress that they're experiencing is so profound, and because they don't know what it is, they don't see any way out. So some other examples are being a people pleaser. right? Trying to make everybody happy, making sure that everybody's okay, because maybe your mother relied on you for her emotional well-being. And so that's how you grew up, to feel that that made you a worthy person, worthy of connection. So you're going to go into your adult life and you're going to be that person that pleases everybody, right? You're not going to have the capacity to set boundaries for yourself, right? And this creates stress. And then the far end of the continuum is that you just determine it's useless, right? And you just give up. And this is the case of children that experience trauma. It very often follows this trajectory. As children, we learn what makes us worthy of love and connection, and in many cases, we decide that there is just something about us that makes us unlovable. And the reason why this becomes an adaptive development in human beings is because what is painful is not just the rejection from your parents, but the vulnerability, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, meaning believing that you're lovable, and being broadsided or hurt or disappointed or having your trust broken over and over. So it's a protective mechanism, and this is why I say it's ingenious, because it kind of turns our idea of shame on its head, because this is the emotion I'm talking about, is shame. Having something happen when we trusted is so much worse than just saying, well, nobody loves me. So we develop shame when we're young because it's actually safer to believe we're not lovable than to make ourselves vulnerable and be hurt and broadsided, right? We take control of our own rejection. And remember, lack of control is one of the factors that triggers our stress response. So we take control over our rejection. So I want to take you through another very short exercise to help you kind of hone in on some of what I'm talking about. So if you have a pen and a paper, that would be great. And I'll explain this exercise. So take a few moments to think of a time in your childhood when you felt unexpectedly broadsided, betrayed, disappointed, or rejected by an adult or a peer group. So using your pen or pencil, write about or describe this memory. And again, notice any sensations that arise in your body as you do this exercise. And I'll give you a minute or so to do this. So again, if this was a live audience, I would have you explain what this exercise felt like to your partner. And then I would ask you to not tell me any details of what you wrote, but just what it was like. And what I get when I ask that question is people are usually very honest. I get things like, I felt shame, I felt guilt, I felt a pain in my stomach, I felt a heaviness in my heart, I felt like I wanted to cry. And so this is an illustration of using what we learned in that lemon exercise with something that actually is very personal to you. The experience basically is you were vulnerable and you got hurt as a child. And when you think about those things and kind of call them up, that experience recreates itself in your body, right? So this is what we call somatic experiencing, and it can also be classified as somatic distress because it's uncomfortable. Now, in the case of trauma, it is so uncomfortable that oftentimes when we get to a certain age, we start to use unhealthy coping strategies to help us escape those feelings. So this is where you can start to see what's at the root of things like addiction and eating disorder and other health risk behaviors. But we can understand with compassion why individuals might look to these coping strategies to escape the somatic distress in their bodies, because that somatic distress feels very real. It feels very much like it is that event from long ago. The problem with that is that it creates what I call a stress feedback loop. And here's what that looks like. I have a slide for you. It starts with a sensory trigger, as I mentioned. Could be a sound, it could be a feeling, it could be a time of year, a season, it could be the sound of someone's voice, it could be a feeling of powerlessness emanating from inside the body. And that's really important to know, especially during this pandemic. We all feel powerless, right? That's the sensory trigger. That triggers a body sensation. So there's a visceral experience we have because as these hormones and biochemicals flood to our muscles and our organs, we are going to feel it. Our minds tag it with an emotion, right? Our minds say, this is guilt, this is shame, this is anger and resentment. And we then create thoughts around that experience, and we very often judge it. We'll say to ourselves, I can't believe this is happening. Why did I do this again? I got to figure this out. I got to make things better. Or we judge outwardly, right? So we blame. Brene Brown describes blame as a way to discharge pain and discomfort. So we create thoughts and judgments, and then we resist and avoid. So this is where these health risk coping mechanisms come in. That resistance and avoidance creates more sensory triggers. So there's a Buddhist principle that talks about the first and second dart. The first dart is the somatic distress. It's that sensory response to whatever's happening. It's what you felt when you wrote down those memories of your childhood betrayal or feeling broadsided. That's your sensory response. The second dart is the suffering. So the second dart in Buddhism is what happens up here, right? So in order to start to bring yourself some peace, some happiness, some resilience, some balance, there are tools that we can use that bring space between what happens in your body and then what happens in your mind and what your actions and reactions are going to do. Now, when that somatic distress happens, that's a mechanism of the sympathetic nervous system, right? That's the survival response, as I mentioned. Breathing in a way that activates your vagus nerve and activates your parasympathetic nervous system is going to take that heightened survival response, that heightened sympathetic nervous system, and bring it back down to balance so it can actually function. Every time we give ourselves a new experience doing that, we create more confidence. That builds our resilience, which is our ability to navigate through adverse moments. And that starts to build empowerment, right? So it's not just that we're responding to those experiences with kind of this panic and fear or judgment. We respond to it with a different perspective. We say, I've been here before. I know what this is. I know there's another side to it. I am going to use this tool. I'm going to create some space and bring myself back to balance. Now, the way that this actually creates healing is that if you think of every somatic memory as a blue marble, so you have a jar of blue marbles, and those are all those old learned responses. Every time you use a tool to put space between what you feel in your body and how you respond, you are creating a new experience for yourself, and that new experience becomes a new memory. So imagine that you take a blue marble out of your jar and you put a green marble in. That's the new memory. Well, initially, it's a little bit of work because the jar is still primarily filled with blue marbles. But over time, so imagine, over time, every time you give yourself a new experience, you take a blue marble out, you put a green marble in, eventually that jar is going to be filled more with green marbles than with blue marbles. And that's when your body begins to have new implicit memories. So over time, that somatic stress won't be there. Over time, and I've experienced this myself, and I've heard it from women, over time something will happen, and you're looking around saying, where's that feeling I usually have? I'm usually feeling really guilty. I'm usually feeling really responsible. I usually feel shame here. But it's because you've given yourself enough new experiences using these tools to create new implicit memories in yourself. So I'm going to lead you through a very simple breath that we call balloon breath. So take a moment and bring your hand to your heart. And bring your other hand to your belly. Now the reason I'm going to lead this way is that by doing this with your belly, it actually creates, it requires the diaphragm to move up and down. And when the diaphragm moves up and down, it massages the vagus nerve and it activates it. So one hand to heart, one hand to belly. Take a breath in and let your belly inflate like a balloon. So feel it kind of push out. And breathe out and relax it down. Again, breathe in, inflate the belly. Breathe out, relax it down. One more time, breathe in, inflate the belly. Breathe out, relax it down. Now for the last three, we're going to inflate the belly and inflate the chest, so filling the lungs. Breathe in, inflate the belly, fill up the lungs, feel the chest rise, hold, and breathe out. Two more, breathe in, inflate the belly, inflate the lungs, rise the chest, hold, and breathe out. One more time, breathe in, inflate the belly, inflate the chest, hold, and breathe out. Just take a moment to scan through your body and notice what you might feel. So that is it for my presentation. I do hope it's helpful. I think it's really important at this time during this pandemic when so many of us are triggered because our environment is just really unpredictable right now, to really dive deep into this information. It's all in my book called, again, There's Nothing to Fix. You can find it on Amazon. It's available in paperback, Kindle, or audio book. You can find me on Facebook. The page is There's Nothing to Fix. On Instagram, it's at There's Nothing to Fix. And please feel free to email me with any questions or for further information. I hope you all stay safe. We're all in this together. Let's get through it moment to moment, creating space and allowing ourselves to be present for ourselves and those that we're caring for and those that are around us. Thank you so much.